things evolve, right? And guns are gonna evolve. And if I have the ability to be able to shoot something that is as powerful as a grenade, are you gonna be like, that's your right, because if someone can have it, I should too.
It's the Second
or someone
Amendment.
can, and that's the problem. There has to be some restriction, unless you all believe that we should all be able to have nukes at our homes, grenades at our homes, grenade launchers at our homes.
We should be able to have equal whatever the government has.
Welcome back to Middle Ground. My name's John. I'm the host of the Radical Empathy podcast, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. Our topic is pro-gun versus anti-gun, and our first prompt is, I fired a gun. If that's true for you, please step forward.
So my family does hunt. That's a part of our culture. And when I was younger, my dad, I've gone with him. I've never killed an animal, but I have gone with him for like tracking purposes or, being outside, connecting with nature. And he did teach me how when I was younger. So it's not something I've done regularly, but I have done it.
Same here. I've got like family friends that are very into guns, and one summer they wanted me to have the experience of like shooting a gun. So I tried it. I didn't love it, but try everything once, I guess.
Why didn't you love it?
I just didn't like the feeling. It was really heavy. I was very young, and I don't know. It just wasn't for me, I guess.
I spent a lot of time in the Middle East growing up, so when we were in the Middle East, we would hunt, use guns in general, and when I would come to America, my family's had guns, I even have guns, and so I've shot multiple times.
Well, I've shot a gun, I loved it, and my whole family loves guns, so I think that's kind of how the culture was instilled on me.
Yeah. Well, my whole life is guns. I own over 300-400 guns, you know what I mean? So I shoot them all the time, every day. And I'm also a United States Marine Corps war veteran. I've been to war. So I shot a lot of guns in my life.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I grew up around guns. My father was military and police. My older brother was military and police. My little brother is military. And I was taught to fire weapons at a very early age because my father believed that if you remove the curiosity from a child about the gun and they're uncomfortable with it, they won't be interested. So he was right. It created gun safety in our home. I did not like firing a gun when I was young, and I fire guns now regularly as an adult. It is about the gun and how it feels and how it shoots and how you operate it. So
that's crazy. I do that with my kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't even mess with them.
Yep.
You know
So it
what I
takes
mean?
away all
I
the
can keep them all
curiosity.
over the house.
Yeah.
They don't want it
Yeah.
anymore. Dad, man, that's your gun. Leave it alone.
I was the same. I grew up in Alabama, but my family didn't hunt, weren't military. My dad's a pastor, but they just believed in them for self-defense. And so they were always around the house. We were also instructed very young with firearm safety. And then if my brothers especially wanted to shoot growing up, then my dad would take them and practice with them. I mostly didn't want to because I also have never loved the feeling of shooting a gun. Even now, I have a gun. I'm a registered concealed carry permit owner, but I don't love the feeling, to be honest. And you're right, it differs based on the gun. Mm-hmm. But I'm not a hobbyist. I think it still revolves around the element of self-defense for me. So it's something I think you need to take responsibility for.
Would anybody want to kind of elaborate just on the feeling of firing a gun, whether it's positive or negative, just as more of an experience?
It depends on the gun, but a
depends
lot
on
of
the
them
person,
kick
too.
really heavily. Even I have a revolver that I got that's meant for women. It's about this big, and it's great to carry because it's small, it's easy, it's light, but shooting it sucks. It really hurts. Some of the larger guns, I've shot an AR-15, it's like butter. It doesn't hurt at all to shoot it. So it definitely depends on which instrument you're using.
I think the person too. I got post-traumatic stress, but they told me I got it different. I get a rush. So now when I shoot a gun, it's like, you know what I'm saying? I relieve all the stress, everything is about me. I'm having a great time, you know what I'm saying? So it's all on the person and the gun and everything, you know?
We're going to bring in our disagreeer.
Can't believe you never shot a gun. Why you never shot a gun?
So growing up, my family, we didn't really have a lot of guns around the house. And my cousins or my relatives didn't really have guns, or it wasn't like an outing.
It wasn't a thing. It wasn't
an
around,
outing, yeah. And I found a pellet gun. That's the only thing that my father had growing up, was a pellet gun that he hid in his closet away. And it was one day where me and my sister were playing around, and I found it, and I actually, pointed it towards my sister. So it was a very traumatic experience for myself, right, and for my family, to the point where when that was brought up, it was more so like somebody said, education on how guns are not as helpful around communities of color. If there's not a right education.
Where did you grow up? 'Cause
I grew up
I
in
live
New
around
York.
New Orleans, Louisiana.
I grew up in New York, Brooklyn,
Is
New
it
York.
dangerous?
Yes. It was
So you don't think you need something to protect yourself?
well, not particularly in Brooklyn, New York, because there were already a mass surveillance of police who had guns,
Yeah, but
right?
but police, you got to call police. It takes time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
We will have a prompt dedicated
all right.
to
Yeah,
this.
gotcha.
Perfect. It was never a curiosity for me because of that traumatic experience that I had with my sibling and not really having guns around. So I just never had that inkling in my life
it's
to even
understandable.
try to go to a range, or even when friends would suggest it, I would be like, oh, okay, good for you, you know, but I don't really have that
It's not your
interest.
thing. It's understandable.
Did you? Do you mind if I ask? Did you actually accidentally shoot your sister as well, or did you just? Point it
No,
out? Okay.
it was just, watching film and we're playing,
Yeah, I got you, blah,
right,
blah,
you know,
yeah.
bad guy or good guy.
You could have
and
made a
then-
big mistake.
And it was a pellet gun, and my mom was like, boy, if you point that again, and
Your mom knew that you wasn't supposed to point it.
Right.
If they would have taught you earlier,
Right.
you would have known that.
right, but I think they didn't teach me because we didn't have guns around. None
Even
of my
with the
family
BB
had
gun.
guns around. Even the BB guns, like
should've
it was,
showed you.
It wasn't a thing.
It just wasn't a thing in
to
your house.
to
Your
have in
dad
my
just
family.
had it. It's in the closet.
Exactly.
He might have shot it 2 or 3 times. I got you.
Exactly.
I
And
got
my
you.
parents grew up and they didn't really go to the range, or
I
none
got
of
you.
their friends even spoke about it as well.
Makes
Well, and
sense.
you can't negate the fact that, like, access-wise, illegally in New York, I mean, how much access do you guys even have? Like,
Right.
only celebrities and, like, very important people can even obtain the right to self-defense in New York. So,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's a problem, too, because it's like, how much education did your parents get? Like, how much access did they have? And if they did
Right.
want to teach them, like, where's there a range? You can't go to a range in New York. Like,
Right.
they really do strip people in whole geographic areas of being able to access what we got in the South, you know?
They do.
All right, we're gonna reset. Next prompt. I'd let my children be around guns. Will the agreeers please step forward?
Well, I currently have 3 children, ages 10, 7, and 4. I mean, I carry regularly, so they know that the gun is on my person. They never are curious about it. They never really want to touch it because they know what I've taught them, right? And that's what it comes down to is I've taught them, you can touch this, you can look at it. It's not that exciting. In fact, it's actually quite scary. If you were to use this wrong, you would kill somebody. And that's terrifying to children, right? So they have learned, well, you know how to operate it, so you've got it and you've got us and you're keeping us safe. There's no need for me to need to touch that or look at it or play with it.
I've always felt like that too, you know what I mean? Like, if you don't show the kids when they're young, like, if you say, hey, here's my gun, come on outside. You wanna see what the gun do? Come on, put your earmuffs on, let's go. Put your glasses on. Pow! The kids be like, oh, I don't wanna touch that. I don't want nothing to do with that, Daddy. Hey, let me leave that alone, and they learn. You have to show them, you know what I'm saying? You have to lead by example. Basically, you know what I'm saying? Hey, if I'm shooting, I need to teach my son and my kids at an early age so I can know they won't have no problems later on down in life.
If you tell a child, don't touch my gun, the thing that they want to do most
touch
is
the
touch
gun.
your gun. Like anyone that has kids knows if you tell them not to do something, that's all they want to do.
Rambo, you said you had 300 guns?
Yeah, I got about 300 guns, yeah. And my kids are on them all the time, all day. I got them all around my bed.
You don't worry about them
Well,
ever
first
picking
of all,
one up?
I don't leave them loaded. To operate a gun, you can't just grab it and squeeze it. You know what I mean? You got to cock it back, take it off for safety. You might have to take it out the holster. You know what I mean? I have one gun that I keep on me for stuff like that. But the rest of them, they're in safes and maybe a shotgun here. Maybe I might have a gun under the table somewhere, in a magnet.
wanna be a
I got
guest
a couple
at his
guns
house.
all over. I got
At
a
any
couple.
moment
all
you
over.
have a gun pointed at you, ready.
You know what I mean? They all over the house. You know what I mean? I can't lie. But I'm from Louisiana, man. It's a
cultural
It's a
thing.
culture. Like I grew up. My father had like 30 shotguns in his closet. It's a cultural thing. It's a sportsman's paradise in Louisiana. That's all we do: hunt, fish, shoot.
If I had children, I would teach them in a proper way. I think it's harder specifically because I was born and raised in California. Is it hard in California? Absolutely. Especially because the right to bear and conceal arms is definitely harder to obtain. There are many cases where California just constantly wants to instill laws to hinder people's freedom to exercise the Second Amendment. And so in terms of the school systems and public school systems, I would not trust my children to be trained with a gun. I think that's something for the parents, and that's something that should be instilled by the parents from the young age, like we've discussed, because children need to understand that the right to protect themselves is a freedom and is within our amendment right. And when you are constantly seeing, for example, even in the media, where guns should be feared for, it kind of creates a controversial statement for our simple fundamental amendment rights.
My son's been having a loaded gun in his room since he was 10 years old. And his
You said
room is
loaded?
Loaded. Not one in the chamber, but in the magazine. He knows how to operate it and everything. He has a bulletproof vest, he has a gun, he has everything. Now he has way more. I'm a Marine Corps war veteran. I've seen death. People could get crazy, and I just had to teach my son, like, hey, he might have to save me. You can't wait on the police, man. You can call them, but it might be too late.
So I don't have kids and I don't plan to have kids, but if I did, like I would absolutely want them trained, particularly young girls. I think it's really, really important for females to learn to exercise the Second Amendment and to protect themselves. Like if you want to talk about feminism, that is the only thing that actually makes you equal to a man as a woman. Like that is, to me, just, it's a crime to not teach girls how to defend themselves. Yep. I want to add one caveat though, which is I do have another family member I won't identify, but who had some significant issues in adolescence and was having a lot of violence issues and was having some run-ins with the police. In those kinds of situations, you also have a responsibility as a parent, as a family member, to keep dangerous guns away from kids who are showing those kinds of signs. And that's on you as a parent in the home. You know if your kid's not right. You know,
right.
And you have a duty to ensure that they are no longer accessing those and that you're notifying law enforcement, you're notifying the school. And I do think that, like, I don't want to just carte blanche say, like, all kids are fine around guns. Not all kids are fine around guns, so.
We're gonna pull in our disagreeers.
So I would say, you know, just this last year, it was reported that among child-related deaths in America, gun violence was one of the main factors. That's alarming, right? Even before I knew that statistic, if I ever had kids, and I am planning on having kids, I would not allow my children to be around firearms.
Where did you get your statistics from? Because sometimes I look on the internet, they say one thing, then they say another thing, and so you might be looking at something that might not even be right.
But it is accurate.
Well, it's accurate.
I don't know. I just make sure.
Hold on. It is accurate, but it's accurate because death in children is exceedingly rare. There's very few things that kill them, period. And when you look at the number of things that could kill them, yes, that outranks like drowning or being run over by your parents' car. But that statistic, and many like it, get thrown around to say, like, this is a huge problem that's happening all the time. That's not the reality. It's just that it's a low
I feel like even though if it's like a low probability, we should do what we can to stop it, right?
Like, it is still the truth that is the number one killer of children.
I mean, is there a number of children that you would care about?
Is it suicide killing?
Well, so I worked as a mental health.
Gun-related.
Yeah, so I worked as a mental health therapist, and I specifically worked with a lot of kids too. But yeah, I mean, right now we have 50,000 suicides a year. Of that, 29,000 are from guns. Of those, 90% are successful when people do attempt. But when they do attempt with other different things, so let's say cutting your wrist, it's at 6.2%. If we look at things like drug overdoses, it's at like 10, 12%. It's because you have the ability to call the police, you have the ability for someone to find you. And so when it comes to things like having guns around children, you're putting it at a high rate of all of those different things.
The same is true having a pool at your house or having a car that you're driving. So I could ask you the same thing, like what number before we ban these other?
Yeah, I mean, do we have rules on driving?
We do have rules.
How many
we have a
rules do we
lot
have?
of rules on guns, a whole lot of rules on
So
guns.
you don't
Sure,
think, you don't think
but
the parents should teach them?
But no. So here's a great way to put it. Do you want your kids around drugs, doing drugs? No. But do you want to educate them on them? Yes. So there's a difference between, like, I want my kids around it versus I'm going to educate them. Of course, I'm going to educate my kids on guns. The same way I'm going to educate them around a lot of things that I don't want them to do, but that's what we have to do. There is over 300 million guns in America, so I'm going to have to teach my kid that. And the other thing is, too, is there has to be a line drawn for everyone. Forget everything, throw everything out the door. Is there a number that would draw you to say, you know, I want heavy restrictions? I've had debates with thousands of people over this, and they'll say, like, no, I don't care. It's amendment right, which it's an amendment. We literally added it, and we changed the amendments, and we have many times. So to me, I throw that all out the window and just say, what is that number? What does that look like to you?
I think for me, the number would have to be that you could prove that there are more lives being lost to gun violence than saved.
Oh, that's easy. That's already happening right now.
It's no way. All right, so last year,
Yeah.
about 18,000 people were killed with a gun.
Yeah.
They estimate 162,000 people saved their own lives in interactions where they
Wait,
most
you said
certainly
how many people died with a gun last year?
Around 18,000.
But there's 29,000 just in suicides and guns last year. You're completely
I
wrong.
said gun homicides. 18,000
yeah.
or so gun homicides.
And
we're going
we
to
have
separate
to-
this out.
Why?
Because suicides are a whole different matter and require different solutions. But we're going to talk about
No, 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 no.
homicides where
That-
you have no control in the situation.
Yeah, sorry.
Around 18,000 people were murdered last year with guns.
Yeah.
162,000 are the rough estimates for how many people saved their lives last year with a gun.
And
so when
define
you
save
could,
your lives.
they were in interactions where the statistics show they would have definitely or certainly lost their lives had they not had a gun to protect themselves. So they were in high-stakes situations where had they not had a gun to protect themselves, it is almost certain they would have been murdered.
How-
I have a question.
how
Did they
certain?
have to like shoot the gun in order to save themselves?
Yeah,
or
that's
just,
statistic,
Not
because
always.
I've studied
Not
that
always.
statistic in depth, and what
Well, you
you're
didn't
sa-
seem to know it.
No,
but
no,
no, they don't always have to have shot the gun. It is whether or not they had a gun. Sometimes they had to shoot it, sometimes they did not. But still, the statistics about how many people are saving their lives every year dwarf the number of
hold on,
gun
hold on.
violence homicides.
There's a problem with the statistic. I'll make it quick, which is there's no way to say for certain you would have died if you didn't have a gun. Let's say I go in to rob someone with a gun, and then they had a gun and I left. That is not a statistic to say you would have died if you didn't have a gun.
Right.
And that's what that study actually shows.
That's not what it showed. It shows they were in interactions where somebody had a gun to their head. They were in a high-stakes situation, and had they not had a gun to
that
defend
person would have
themselves,
for sure pulled
they
the trigger.
most certainly would have.
How would you know that?
The likelihood is very high
No,
that
no,
they
how
would
would
have.
you know that?
And again, what number is fine for you to say you don't have the right to defend yourself in that situation?
I would say that
because I would say I
40,000
would
people dying a
much
year from
rather
that.
err on the side of being able to defend yourself, and that's a low ball statistic. It's really around 500,000 to over 1 million they estimate maybe have interactions where they save their lives, but they can't measure that because it's harder to measure things that don't happen.
I had a question for the parents. So you said you're a parent and you're a parent. My question would be like, if your child started showing like mental health warning signs, like maybe they're like showing signs of early serial killer traits, or they're being really depressed, what do you think that letting them experience a gun and firing a gun and knowing how to use it, how do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that is, it's like non-negotiable. First of all, when I say they have access, they don't have access. All of our guns are in safes, right? So they can't access them anyway. But I'm telling you right now that if any of my children showed any mental distress, emotional distress, or had to be on medications, they would have no access to my weapons whatsoever. And I think that that is a huge issue. And when you say, here's this huge statistic of how children have died with guns, the issue is going to every time go back to mental health, not the gun. Because if a child has a mental health issue, they will find a way to hurt someone or hurt themselves.
It sounds like you're pretty vigilant.
I'm very vigilant, and I do think that we have some issues with parents not taking authority in their home and not being able to recognize your child has an issue. If your child has an issue, you are vigilant in your home to make sure that those guns are secure and safe. If my husband went off the rocker, I'd take his guns from him.
There was a comment made earlier, I think by Hannah, that if there is an issue with your kid, if something's going on, you know. And I just don't agree with that.
right.
I
I
don't
was
think
about
that
to
that's
say
true.
that.
You
You
really
do
don't.
not always know. And I do think it's better to err on the side of safety. And like Dom was saying earlier, death by suicide with a gun is much higher, and you don't always know what's going on with your kids. And as much as you want to, and you want to say like, where is the parent? You don't know what that parent is going through. You don't know their situation. Maybe they, have an inkling, or maybe they don't. Just giving that access to the kid and having it available puts them at a much higher risk.
Right, and I wanted to say even
Oh,
with.
sorry, I gotta
Go ahead.
put. You're expecting.
I am, yes.
Is this your
You,
first
you
child?
better hope so.
Congratulations.
Thank you. This is my first child. I am expecting a girl, and I don't think that I'm going to build her feminism off of whether or not she can have a gun. I want her to be able to protect herself, stand up for herself, and be comfortable in who she is without a gun.
So if she's very strong and very well trained, and she's a confident young lady, and she's a feminist, and she has a 300-pound man with a gun pointed at her, what do you think is?
Why does this man have a gun?
Well, yeah. Okay.
No, I
So
wasn't
There's
doing
men
it,
with
but-
guns all over
But
the
to clarify, I think, and this goes back to her statistic, which is, hey, it saves people because there's a gun pointed to their head. But that's why we're having the discussion of banning those guns.
Let me
And
ask
if
you
you
a
say,
question.
if you say,
so bad
well,
guys aren't ever going to
crazy.
get guns?
well, you're,
Bad guys are
So
never
you
going
think
to
the
have
bad
guns?
guys are going to be like, yeah, I don't want to ever touch a gun in my life.
We gotta reset. We have to reset. Gun violence is destroying black communities. Will the agreeers please step forward?
All the gun-related deaths in America, black children are suffering the most from gun-related deaths. Since 2006, it has been increasing that black children are the victims of gun-related deaths in America. And out of 14% of black people in America. Black people make up 83% of gun-related deaths in America. So,
And why do you think that's true?
I know it's true because I've seen it growing up in different neighborhoods, whether it be in Southern California or whether it be in New York. I've seen it by police-related deaths in America, and even being perceived with a water gun. Black children are murdered. For example, in the 1960s, we've seen the Black Panther Party in America, who started to legally, by the way, have a right to carry and protect their communities. But it wasn't until a black resistance group that Ronald Reagan at the time, who was the governor of California, enacted the Mulford Act, which then restricted most of Californians from having guns. But the whole time, we had white Americans carrying in California, we had white Americans carrying everywhere else, but it wasn't until a black resistance group, I want you guys to understand that. It wasn't until a black resistance group, Black Panther parties, came out and started to protect their communities that America said, oh, we have to have more strict gun laws, all right? And this continues to repeat, right? So I think we're continuing to see the same pattern of, some states and some governments have more strict gun laws when it comes to black Americans than white Americans, for sure.
When it comes down to specifically like inner city gun violence and things like that, there's a long history of obviously racism, redlining, and things that lead up to it. So it's a longer discussion, but frankly, what people need to understand is the contextual understanding of when you grow up in an area where everyone has guns, your mindset and what they all talk about, and they are right, is to equal the playing field. I should have a gun. That's gonna make me feel a little bit safer, and frankly, I get that. It's like having mutual destruction with nukes. Countries do that, but we also try and de-escalate by getting rid of our nukes and reducing our stockpile, because we know ultimately it isn't safe that everyone has these things. And so, but that's why, and I think everyone on this side believes that like if we can push towards, like they have in many different countries and it has worked, if you push towards reducing those guns, then those people see less need to have those guns. A lot of people saying, like they're gonna say is, oh, well, the bad guys are gonna get their hands on guns. Every year, 300,000 guns are stolen from law-abiding citizens who don't know how to properly lock up their guns. And the problem with a debate like this is we're speaking to people who are very good gun owners, very educated. You're talking to basically the street racing drivers and saying like, hey, I can go 110 on the freeway, trust me, if you just know how to, I get it. You probably could and you might not get in an accident, but that's not everyone.
I definitely agree. I think that the issue of gun violence is not just about guns. I think it's a systemic issue, and I think black communities in particular have been intentionally divested and oppressed by our government, and I think that guns fill the gaps where resources are not, and just taking away guns isn't going to like change the, there's so many other roots to this issue that need to be addressed. Over policing also, black communities are over policed more than any other community, and gun violence also happens at the hands of police who are supposed to be protecting. And then of course, it makes sense that you would want to have a gun to feel like you can protect yourself against this, but this is all a product of a broken system that has been broken for many years.
So what I'm hearing is there's a belief that black communities have a high presence of firearms for various reasons.
Yeah, it's called Animes, A-N-A-M-I-E-S, which basically the ideation that like your morals shift based on the environment you're in. So I did a study specifically on Egypt and how they had their uprising and how people were starting to sell drugs on the street, and why did they do that? Well, that was the only way to feed their children. And so people don't wake up and go like, I want to be a drug dealer. It's like, hey, back in the time where you couldn't even get a job based on your skin color, what you had to do to survive was a lot different than everyone else. And so when you get into things that are illegal, because that is literally all you can do, you then have to basically have a gun. You have to change the way that you view the world, because that's the world that you're given. So you're like, hey, I'm in selling drug business, and to compete, I need a gun to be safe. I'm gonna get robbed. And it creates this environment. Now, when we shift forward where everything's quote unquote equal, it's like, why are you guys still having guns? Well, that's what we grew up around. That's what we knew. That's what we know. And it's a long systemic issue that is very hard to fix. But America in general is affected by it, but obviously black communities are affected the most by it.
All right, I'm gonna bring in our disagreeers.
Whew, where to start? So I think if you want to talk about systemic racism, and I do, I have a background in criminal justice reform, gun control is one of the most systemic racist laws on the books, dating back to slavery, where we prohibited slaves from having guns because obviously an armed population could rise up. After slavery ended, you had the black codes continuing to try to block black people from being able to access guns because they weren't full citizens. Then you had the 14th Amendment come in, so now everything should be clear. But no, states started putting in facially neutral laws in the 1870s, where basically they still had things on the books to block black people from getting guns. That's a history that has followed us. I love that you brought up the Black Panthers. This should be a wake-up call. Yes, when the black community has started to organize after things like the Atlanta Massacre and the Tulsa race riots, what happened? They started arming themselves. They started rising up. You had the Deacons of Defense that were out here guarding Martin Luther King Jr., and they came in and squashed them. Shortly after 1964, you get the Civil Rights Act. 1968, they come in and pass the Gun Control Act, which creates a system that has a background check and all of this. But most importantly, it starts stating things that people can be stripped of their gun rights for. And what's chief among it? Having a felony. Who's most likely to be arrested? Black people are 6 times more likely to have a record than white people. This is the scam. It has always been about eliminating black people's rights to access their Second Amendment. It's super racist, and today we see that continuing to play out in the black community. So, but to say that like gun control or guns are the problem, no, like in fact what we're doing is we're making them more likely to be targeted by police. This is where you get stop and frisk. It's about gun control. They only get something off them like 3% of times, but it gives them the excuse to come in and shake them down. You have, I think, 20% higher likelihood that black people to this day are convicted, sentenced, and given sentencing enhancements, that's from the Sentencing Commission, if they're black. So this is something that has continued to be targeted against the black community, and what I can't understand from your side is why would you come in and say, give that same government more power?
But are you saying there's an issue where black people don't have access to guns?
Yeah,
Like
or
they
like
need more
legally.
guns. Like black people need
No,
more
I
guns.
think
But I
legally-
feel like I'm hearing two contradictory things because I'm hearing black communities have a gun
I think-
issue because they have too many
And
firearms.
you're saying
Black
they don't have
communities
enough.
have a gang issue. They have a violence issue. They have a poverty issue. These are things that lead to criminality. But when you come to black people being able to legally access their right to carry a gun and not being shaken down by the government for it, and not being incarcerated for it and permanently stripped of their right to vote after they've been caught with a gun, yes, this has been a complete disenfranchisement of the Second Amendment towards the black community. And we can talk about the violence issues happening because I think they're government related too. But that's not the guns that are creating the violence
So you
issues
think
in
if
these
the
communities.
if that area had more guns, there'd be less violence?
I think if you had more gang intervention, I think if you had ceasefires,
No, but
I
I'm
think if you
asking
had
in general,
call-ins.
would more guns help?
No, I don't think so
Would
because
less-
you
would
have
less-
violence
would
issues.
less guns
I don't.
help?
I've seen no indication of that because you have a
It's- it's-
violence
it's-
issue.
It's funny to
you have
me.
a poverty
It's funny to me.
issue.
No, I agree.
We agree.
I think
I think we
fine.
agree on
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
like you're talking about
It
the
can be
over
swa-
policing,
yeah.
the being
you-
racist about who gets the gun. That
Right.
we
It's
agree.
Violence
on.
yeah.
comes up because of different issues, right? Like sometimes I think mental health gets vastly overblamed for these things. Occasionally, yes, but more often it is because of the fact that people don't have opportunities. They get involved with gangs. They're looking for places to go. Violence is very limited to people under age 25. Once their brain is fully developed and once they get the resources they need to get on a better
agree.
pathway
I
out of
agree.
these
The thing-
communities, you see violence.
No, we
do
fully
this.
agree.
The thing funny to me is y'all talk all this violence, but I'm in the streets with these people. The same people that you talk about come up to me. I make YouTube videos. I get banned all the time. I teach proper stuff, how to fly with a gun, how to do this with a gun. I get banned. You can't even find my stuff. And you know what? People come up to me and say, hey, Rambo, man, I really appreciate you, man. Without you, I wouldn't know how to do this. I wouldn't know how to do this. Hey, Rambo, I make bullets. You know how many calls I got from people? Like, I got goosebumps. Calls I got from people say, your bullets saved my life.
But are you saying violence isn't an issue in those communities?
What is an issue with every community? It's gangs, man.
I
But
think
you're-
that
but you're
violence
saying-
is like
but
it's
you're of the
higher
mindset of
in
more guns would
those
help.
black
Well,
communities.
I
and
can't say more guns will help. I think more control with like gangs and stuff. It's not like regular people just running around, just shooting them up, killing
But
people.
where do the gangs get their guns?
Right.
Guess what? From anywhere. You don't think they
Well,
can get them from
but where?
overseas?
But where?
You telling me?
No, not
You telling me?
overseas. That
You
doesn't
telling me a
happen.
boat of guns
Let
never
Rainbow
came from
finish.
overseas?
Well, no, it relates to the government.
You telling me they
and
never
for-
ship guns from overseas?
Well,
I know the people that used to do it, man. What you
Well-
talking about?
We do know that in about 40% of homicides, they were obtained illegally. So where they got it, how they got it illegally, this is one other thing I wanted to address when you guys were saying about guns getting stolen off cars. I had a gun stolen in my car. I'm very good with my gun. I would never take it off my person if it were in my control. I had to take it out because I was at the Capitol in Tennessee lobbying. I wasn't allowed to take it into the governor's office, even though he could carry in there. But I had to put it in my car, put it in my glove box. It was a last minute thing, and I was like, okay, I guess I have to like leave this in my car.
you lock your, like,
Locked
glove
my
box
car.
and
Yeah, I did everything I could. broke in, stole it. This is how people, and
can't
literally,
lie.
I mean,
Do you
I
think
got
in that
guns stolen
case?
too.
Do you think in that case, if you weren't allowed to carry a gun in your car on you, that it wouldn't have gotten stolen?
had the government not disarmed me and made me go put my gun in my car, it wouldn't have been stolen. Everybody would have
why
been safe.
have a gun? How come you can't have a taser, or how come you can't have
What's
pepper
a
spray?
taser gonna do to a 250
When my
pound
lights
man?
It doesn't matter how much he weighs.
listen,
it
You can
does
just
matter.
tase them,
When
and
my-
pepper spray
Have
and
you
then
not
run
seen
away.
videos of people getting tased and continue to come at you? Like, that does
But
not.
I think there's an extreme of like, you're gonna protect yourself. If someone walks behind you and shoots you, what did the gun do? Did it help you?
It didn't.
I want to kind of get some clarity because I still feel like I'm hearing like a contradictory thing. Who is in favor of there being more guns in black communities? And why is that?
So according to the Department of Justice and also the Pew Research Center, as the number of guns have increased in this country, as the gun rate ownership has increased, so has the homicide rate has decreased. And it's decreased not just for homicides, but also for suicides. So statistically, we actually know that as there are more guns, you actually have less violence.
Suicides just reached the highest peak this year.
Nope, not the highest peak. The
Yes, it
highest
is.
peak
It's
since
not
about
equal causation
1980
as
something,
well.
but not the highest peak.
But we have the highest level of guns we have today, and we have the highest level of suicides today.
No.
Or one of the highest levels. It's,
Right.
it's gone up.
So people have a mental health issue because they want to kill themselves and they just happen to have a
No,
gun.
but she's
We'll
saying
dig
that it
we'll
goes
dig
They
down.
just
into
don't have
mental
news
health.
or medicines
We'll
laying
dig
around.
into mental health in a minute.
Let me ask you a question. If you live somewhere you couldn't eat, you couldn't feed nobody, you got guns all the way around your house, everything, you wouldn't get a gun to protect yourself.
that's what we
and they
said,
breaking
yeah.
in doors. And,
No.
but criminals all over though. You're
To
not
be
gonna
honest, for
stop-
me,
that's like stopping
that- I
terrorism.
So
would
you're
think-
saying you would get rid of like murder being illegal because clearly people
Right.
still murder, right?
You can't stop it
But why do we have murder being illegal if it still happens? What's
because
the
you
point?
want to catch people.
Because we
Like,
can at least
come on,
prosecute
man.
them and put them
So
in jail.
so we're there. So you get it. So we know that like by having these laws, it will still reduce it. We've seen
Yeah,
it in
it's
other
definitely gonna
countries.
There shouldn't be
reduce it.
laws
There
that
we
apply
go.
to people like
So,
us.
so that's where we need to
More
agree on,
laws
which is
won't make a more reduction.
Wait,
we will.
I don't
do you
think
say
so.
the law shouldn't apply to people like
No,
you?
I'm saying you guys are talking about banning guns. All of a sudden we went straight to like we are anti-gun and we are pro-gun to like let's ban guns. Why are you so eager to take away the freedom of people who use weapons properly for the sake of people who are
'Cause
going to
it's
go
a-
and use
it's-
them
it's a
improperly?
control
This is the equivalent
tactic.
of me saying right now there's 300,000 cases of drunk driving a year, and of those, a small fraction get in a car accident. Why take away my right to drink and drive just because
No,
you can't
let's take
hold
away
your
your
liquor?
car, because your car cannot drive itself,
No,
just like a gun cannot fire itself. So if
Sure.
you take
That's not
away my ability to own and fire a gun,
Her analogy's right.
because
'cause
your
she's
weapon is
talking
the
about-
car.
Yeah.
Your weapon is you abusing
The car is a weapon.
Yeah, you're talking about you.
It's
We're not talking about you.
irresponsibly using the car.
Anyone on this side in favor of restricting law-abiding citizens' access
I
to
believe
guns?
that nobody in this life should have a gun. So,
Okay.
but I'm not the one to say that you shouldn't. You know, I'm all about nonviolence. I don't believe in harming or putting more suffering against any sentient
Well, I
being
think
in
the
this life,
fundamental,
so I don't believe anybody
the fundamental
should have a gun.
aspect of the Second Amendment is not to harm people. It's the right to bear arms and defend yourself. So
Against
let's
a
not
terrain
misconstrude
government.
Oh, we'll
the
get
context
to
of
that.
it.
Right.
Let's go back to the prompt. Remember, we're talking, just in this section, we're talking about gun violence destroying black communities, whether or not you agree with that.
I feel like I can speak to it because I just graduated high school and I'm a black student. I went to school at a primarily black and Hispanic school. So there's like a bit of, I don't want to say gang presence, but that kind of like vibe, I guess. I was worried sometimes that people were going to bring guns to school, and it had been threatened a couple of times. We had to skip school. I think, if they didn't have access to these guns, first of all, the gangs wouldn't have as much power, and I wouldn't have missed out on quality learning time because these people threatened to bring a gun into school. And look, I can't say that it happens any more or less at like a primarily white school, but I'm just speaking from my experience. Guns were an issue, and there was going to be there's a possibility of like real violence happening.
Can I point something to that too? I think if we focused on gun-free zones, we could kind of question why it is that you had to leave the premise too, right? So these gang members would come to your campus and would hinder your education. So what would happen if the administration or staff was loaded and ready to protect children instead of allowing mass shootings in children to occur? What would happen?
Okay, so I actually really hate that argument. Like, we should have the teachers and administration should have guns. More guns is not going to help anything because at the end of the day, like, let's just say you shoot the school shooter, right? Then that's still a dead person, right? And their life isn't worth anything more or less to me than
Right.
my friend's life, because a life is a life, right?
And I'm not
I also
advocating
wanna-
for people to be killed, right? However, when you're in a school situation and you're dealing with a person's life, it's seconds
Have you ever
away
been in
from-
that situation?
Well, I have, and it's been a scary situation.
I was a teacher for 5 years, a public school teacher, and I was a teacher when they were trying to arm teachers. There are so many issues that teachers deal with on a day-to-day basis. Having a loaded gun in my classroom with 19 special education preschoolers is not on the top of my list. That would not make me feel more comfortable. That would not make me feel like my students are more comfortable.
Well, definitely
But
not
statistically,
that.
it would make you more safe.
No, it
Because,
wouldn't.
I mean,
No,
can
it
we talk about gun-free
It's gonna-
zones, or is there a prompt on this, or can I go? Because we looked at the data around this, and over 90% of mass shootings occur in gun-free zones.
If you get rid of every gun, right? You get rid of every gun. Look at the countries that already did it. What happens?
Australia had.
Okay, and what happens? What happens?
They
What
ha-
happens?
they had
I
a-
lived in Japan.
So
they
they-
start stabbing people. Right or wrong? Am I right or
Japan
wong?
also has
The
the
stabbing
highest
goes
rates
up,
of
right?
suicide.
A stab is a
Japan-
lot easier to
Hold on.
A stab is a lot
recover from.
easier?
To recover from
Are
than
you
a
sure?
gunshot wound.
Yeah.
We've kind of moved to a lot of different areas, but I do want just a show of hands. Who is in favor of action to remove illegally obtained firearms from communities?
Nobody wants illegal guns in the community.
I mean, I have some, what does that require when it comes to the policing and the interactions that they're going to have with the people in those communities? This is the same thing to me as saying, like, should we go in and remove all illegal drugs? Like, no, product bans don't work. It doesn't work if you ban drugs. It doesn't work if you ban abortion. It doesn't work if you ban immigration. It doesn't work if you ban drugs.
They're still gonna
People
come
are
in.
going
Does
to
it
obtain
reduce
it.
it?
And
They're
just because
still
somebody
gonna-
has an illegally
So you
obtained gun
don't-
does not mean
Does
they are
it-
a
but
violent
does it
person.
And I
reduce
just
it?
want to get your opinion clearly on this. Do you think there's a correlation between the presence of illegally obtained firearms and the rates of violence in
Sure,
certain communities?
absolutely. But I also think
you
when you
don't
look
think
at public
something should be
policy
done to-
approaches, you have to make sure that the secondary side effects of those approaches are not worse. And when you're talking about sending in police to clamp down on communities
But we
that
didn't say
happen to
that.
have
No one-
higher
no one
rates,
said
well,
that.
that is what you're saying, though.
No one said that.
That requires policing to come
I
in
don't
and
believe police should have
confiscate.
firearms.
But then
as well.
what's one proposed solution?
I mean, community-informed programs. I mean, we see it in Massachusetts. They have community safety programs where individuals go out who are not armed, and they go around neighborhoods of domestic abuse cases, mental health episodes when somebody's having a mental breakdown. They don't call police.
No, he's right though. Call-ins, Operation Ceasefire, like these things
That's
work.
all good.
These
Like,
work.
I would
Without
love in this-
firearms,
I would
though,
love
that's
in
what I'm
this case-
proposing.
But listen to what
Without
y'all saying. Where is
firearms.
that working at? Are y'all going in the middle of Chicago,
No, but I think
in
she-
New Orleans, doing that type
Well,
of
some
stuff?
of these
exactly-
programs
no.
are.
she's exactly
Some
right,
of these
which
programs
is-
are. They're going into places like Oakland. They're working and like this is interesting because I've worked around a lot of criminal justice reform. So I've worked with very left-wing people on this, and most of them are not anti-gun because they recognize that there are so many secondary consequences to that, and they recognize that the gun is not the problem. The underlying causes of violence are. And so yeah, they do these community-based programs that are completely like free of government for the most part, which is like based. Love that. And they come in and they have people who were formerly caught up in gang life. They have people who've been victims of violence even. They do these interactions where they go to the hospital when there's been a gang shooting and try to intervene and prevent there from being retaliation. And yeah, they work. They do see a statistical difference in violence, a meaningful difference, and it's without having to involve the police or the government or come in and take away people's guns. So
Okay, we gotta
I think
reset.
those things are great ideas.
Middle ground.
Hey, before we go any further, we want to take a moment to say thanks so much to Straight Arrow News for powering the fact checks in this video. I know we've all seen shows with hunters hunting dragons and cowboys taking over the world, but in real life, there are actually pirates stealing ships. There's so much going on right now, and there's a lot to talk about specifically in the world of weapons and warfare. But don't worry, our sponsor Straight Arrow News has got your back. Straight Arrow News has a new weekly podcast that will give you unbiased, straight facts on what's happening. Weapons and Warfare is hosted by Ryan Robertson, and from boot camps to boots on the ground, he provides in-depth coverage of international armed conflicts, as well as the latest tech developments in combat worldwide. And yes, he can tell you all about what's happening with those pirates I mentioned earlier. We've been using Straight Arrow News to discover news that's being underreported or not even being reported at all by different sides of mainstream media. What they're doing is so important because in a world of media bias and mistrust, Straight Arrow News reports down the middle with facts, delivering news without bias, filter, or spin. Get front row seats to the most intense and fascinating stories in the world of military operations. Weapons and Warfare has new episodes every Wednesday. Go to san.com/JMG to listen and subscribe. Or you can scan the QR code right here on the screen from your phone's camera. Thanks again to Straight Arrow News for partnering with us on this episode. Now, let's get back into it.
Mass shootings are both a mental health and gun control issue. Will the agreeers please step forward?
I believe that they are a mental health issue, above all else. But when I hear you say gun control, I don't mean governmentally. I mean exactly what we talked about earlier, which is parents being more aware, parents not recognizing that there is a mental health issue, that there is a medication issue, that there is an emotional issue, distress in the home, and taking measures to protect their child. Most of the time, apparently, these children somehow have access to guns. And I think that if they were disturbed enough, we've heard stories in the 90s and 80s about kids bringing knives to school. Well, that's before they had access to guns. If they are distressed and emotional enough and they're wanting to hurt others or themselves, they will find a weapon. But unfortunately, we're living in a society where parents aren't taking as much responsibility for their weapons as they should.
I think that the absolute bottom line is that a mentally healthy person does not commit a mass shooting.
Correct.
And that's just
I would 100% agree.
I think. If you are happy with yourself, you are happy and healthy in your mind, you are not going to shoot up Target or shoot up your school.
Okay, so there was a couple of things that you said that kind of questioned me a little bit. You know, mental illness is completely promoted as propaganda in the media, right? So when you look at the rate for mental health issues in comparison to the amount of mass shootings related to that, it has nothing to do with a mental illness. It has to do more so with mental disorders. Because these people, they're not relying on medication to consciously know what they're doing. They know what they're doing, they're just lacking empathy. So I think...
Wait, what's the difference
And that's
between...
a mental issue, right?
What's the difference between mental illness and mental disorder?
Whatever.
Well, a mental disorder is definitely something that has to do with your sense of removing empathy, consciously knowing you're aware of your situation, similar to a sociopath. It's a mental health issue in the sense that there's a disorder, and obviously depression and bipolar disorder is definitely along those lines. I mean, there's so many environments that kind of instill you to become that. A lot of times you're born that way. You look at the way it's just being perpetrated in the media, and it's instilling fear among a wide variety of people. You know, you see this glorified scheme that's being constantly spread over, which makes people fearful of their lives, which makes people maybe not want to own a gun. I just keep caution with reading the news, because there's a huge video on, for example, Candace Owens talking about the situation where the government does perpetuate a sense of fear and control onto humans in order to hinder their ability to be free and exercise freedom. So when it comes to mental health issues and the correlation with mass shootings, it doesn't add up.
So I'm a mental health therapist. What you're trying to say mostly is it's creating this fear, because obviously mental illness is not just growing exponentially, we're just identifying things more. And I think what you're trying to say simply is it's trying to almost create fear. Oh, you have a mental illness, I should be afraid of you. You're gonna, right. And it's no, I mean, this is what I don't like about it, which is that everyone has mental struggles.
So correct. So let's just ban everyone from owning a gun.
Yeah. Well, and when it comes down to fixing
there's a slippery slope there. So it's.
I think he's talking more about providing resources.
Yeah, providing resources, and I think the other way to understand it too is, and I think what she said, which I kind of disagree in that sense, which is hey, a normal person wouldn't do that. Yes and no. I mean, maybe not mass shootings, but suicides and things like that. Well, we have what we call Z codes, and Z codes in the DSM-5 are basically events in people's lives that may trigger short-term versions of these things. So when I diagnose someone, I take into account, so if you came to me and said I'm really depressed, and I'm oh, why? Oh, my dad just died. I'm gonna go, okay, that's normal. Obviously, you're a struggle, but in that time, you could still shoot yourself, be suicidal.
But in that time, you're also not mentally healthy.
Yeah, but at the same time, no one's mentally healthy at all times. So and then I think someone said this earlier, which was hey, it's on the parents if they don't catch the kid. It's no, because that's telling every parent, hey, if your kid committed suicide, it's your fault. You're an idiot. You're stupid. No. People go through ups and downs heavily.
Right.
Maybe it's just not natural to want to kill other people? I don't know. I feel like that's if you do want to, then there's something maybe wrong in your brain.
It's not that everyone with a mental health issue would shoot up a school. It's that anyone that would go and shoot up a school clearly has a mental issue.
Right.
What's going on here that we feel is causing?
We don't have Jesus.
Right.
We need the world to come back to
I
God.
agree. I agree.
And
that tends to happen is pro-gun people tend to be more religious and tend to view it that way through that lens. I'm atheist.
Well, let's disassociate religion from just loving Christ, right? Because those are two different things. Religion definitely has its own nuance that I don't even want to get into, but just loving God, I think, is what. But
I think the most religious states are the ones with the highest shootings. So
actually, the ones with the most gun control laws.
No, that's actually not true. The top 5 are actually the ones with the least homicides and guns and deaths in guns. The top 5 in terms of lax guns are actually Oklahoma, Kansas, Mississippi, Alabama. They have the highest rate of shooting.
Right.
Justice and Sarah
Yes, I also want to
get
bring up, whether it be the Buffalo mass shooting that we've seen a white supremacist go in and shoot about almost 10 plus black people, or the other shooting where Kyle Rittenhouse shot a bunch of people during the 2020 uprisings.
In self-defense.
We see these instances of white individuals shooting black people in America. There's never been an instance where I have seen anybody on TV, psychologists say this person was having a mental health episode. There's never been and I could keep going down in the last 5 years of several mass shootings where black and brown people have been killed by white supremacists. And there's never been an instance where they say, this person's having a mental health episode, let's give this guy a break. So I kind of step back from saying that mental health is a main issue around gun violence, because when it comes to white supremacists, when it comes to people saying they want Jews to die and they shoot Jews, which has happened, there's never been it's never been an instance of, oh, this guy has a mental health episode.
In my opinion, though, like, being racist is sort of a mental health disorder. But I know it's not like a diagnosed thing. It's just like.
But in America, they don't say that. That's what I'm saying. They say, oh, he had a troubled past and his parents didn't treat him right, so he shot 10 black and brown people in the school.
We have to come at it like multifaceted, and it's so hard to actually attack this, because we could be like, hey, let's worry about mass shootings. Okay, but what about, okay, what? And each one can be attacked in a completely different way. And that's why I tend to go like, look, me and him differ. I'm not ban all guns. I'm like, let's restrict them until there's a happy medium where we've reduced these suicides, reduced mass shootings, but also people like you guys can own them.
Let's hear from Sarah.
Yeah. I just want to say I agree with what you're saying in that, oftentimes mental health is blamed. People pick and choose which communities we use it as a factor or not. I also think that oftentimes when we look at mass shootings that have happened, there are signs that point to this person needed support, specifically in schools, right? A lot of times you might see kids who are making certain drawings or have made certain comments, and a lot of times these kids maybe weren't getting the counseling services they needed at school, or sometimes they are, maybe diagnosed with a disability and maybe they're not, and there's issues that go into that as well. But I think that there are signs that show that somebody needed support or was being bullied, but our culture tells us, there's video games, there's all of these stories about like, well, get your guns, the internet becomes this like place of solace for students who are looking for support and looking for a community that they're not getting at school. And when our culture is telling us, well, guns will be the solution, then they're finding that solace, they're finding that community.
It's Hollywood and it's the government, again.
I think it's a combination.
Because there is a huge documentary, actually, where Michael Bay, the director, along with one of the department chairs of the government, they would share how the government would have to filter and revise scripts in order to create the perpetuation of missiles and the sort of combat scenes that were, because they had to keep control. They're advocating for this to be constantly perpetuated, and I can't emphasize it enough. It's really scary because a lot of people, they kind of keep this narrow mind of, oh, it's actually us, we're the problem. We're actually not the problem.
But I think that's part of our culture. The movies, Hollywood, what we say, I think that's part of it.
It's our culture because the government has come in and has taken over as part investor, and that's a whole other nuanced conversation because I work in the entertainment industry, so I'm very aware of the situation. However, to my point, with mass shootings, the question and the prompt, I think having more gun control laws creates more mass shootings. So that's what I understood from the prompt.
So if you have easier access to guns, there'd be less mass shootings?
Correct.
And are you saying the person wouldn't have went and shot, or that they would be stopped?
Well, regardless, a person would not come in and shoot all these people if people were armed.
So like Uvalde, right? The 376 cops, they did a great job of stopping that shooter, correct?
And it took them 7 minutes, by the way.
Well, cops are not, that's another thing.
But they were trained people with guns, and there was 376. How did that work?
I just think that the government and the state and the police brutality that exists should not be allowed. And that's why people should, again, own guns and have the right to that freedom and express themselves with it. Because
We're gonna get into, we'll have a whole section dedicated to that. Let's bring in our disagreeers.
When it comes to the actual prompt, about 4 to 6% of mass shootings are carried out by people with a mental illness. And I appreciate the nuances being discussed here because it's important. Mental health is a very easy scapegoat, and it's very easy to point to when there are events that people just can't wrap their mind around. So the point is that it is, yes, a little of a mental health issue, but there are broader, more social concerns. I like that you brought up parenting. There's a shitty parent problem in this country. Let's just be frank. There is, and that's the real epidemic. And then lastly, it's a structural problem. The structure creates gun-free zones. As I started to mention earlier, over 90% of mass shootings are carried out in gun-free zones. The structure does not provide resources or early intervention techniques for people who are there on the ground. I think putting more mental health officers and just counselors in general in schools would do a lot more than putting more cops in schools. Less than 2% of homicides are mass shootings in this country. So I appreciate that we're talking about this, but I feel like it often gets very overblown when we're discussing gun violence and its approaches because it is a bit of an anomaly. And I know that often
Do you think it's unique to the United States?
No, I was going to go there next, actually. Out of the, I think, 97 developed countries they've studied that have had mass shootings, we're 64th on the list. We're also number 64 when it comes to homicides per 100,000 people.
Well, I mean, I think just this last year we had more mass shootings in America than calendar days.
No.
So I mean, it was more mass shootings in America
you can't just look
just
at
this
numbers.
last year
You have
than
more
calendar
people
days.
in America than in most countries. We have a homicide rate of about like 1.5%, I think. We have a mass shooting rate of a little under 1.15%. We are 4.6% of the world's population. So when you look at those statistics, no, it's not that we are more likely to have it here. I think we are a larger country by far. And I think the other thing that makes us lean more into violence in general is that we are living in a very diverse population. When you look at countries that have lower rates of violence, they're more homogenous. It's difficult for people to get along. They often have not been given the techniques. You have many cultures that are often clashing. I think a lot of our violence issues actually traces back to that.
Rambo.
I don't understand, man. I don't see what world they live in. You know what I mean? Like, you can't change it. There's good people and there's bad people. I don't care what tests you want to do. I don't care what you want to do. Everybody's not going to hold hands and kumbaya. And somebody's going to want what you got. Somebody's going to want what you got. Somebody might want what that baby has. And I want to protect my family. Oh, they need to do this, they need to do that. It's like a yin and a yang. There's going to be bad. No matter what you do, I don't care if you get rid of every gun, every knife. Somebody might rob you. They might come in gangs and beat you to death. You cannot get rid of it. What world are y'all in?
But you agreed earlier. You said that obviously if there were like a lot less guns taken off the street, that those things would drop, correct?
Well,
not to say it's going to go away, but it would drop.
Let's think about this. How many
like
guns?
Australia
Let's
had
be
a
real.
drop,
How many
all these
guns there are
different
on the
countries had a
streets?
Huh? There's 372 million. Something like that.
372 million.
Yeah,
Are there
something.
372 million murders?
No,
All right then.
but-
So
but
why
that's-
would they do it?
I agree. I agree. With
real.
drinking and driving, there's 300,000
Yeah.
cases a year, and there's only a couple thousand cases of people crashing. So
Yeah.
you also agree that we should be able to drink and drive.
No,
Why?
because
Why
you can drink to a certain limit, can't
Yeah,
you?
but if-
can't you drink
but-
to a certain limit when you're driving? They blow a test. You can drink to a certain limit, right?
No,
so you
no.
can't get drunk.
No, you can.
No, you can drink.
You can still get a DUI under the limit.
So what's the sense of even blowing then?
Because if you are clearly impaired, and so here's the thing is like if I go, but I'm the best driver, trust me, and this is the problem with having a debate like this with people who are very good with their guns. I'm okay with you guys having your guns because clearly you've demonstrated 100 different ways that you know how to use it, but at the very least, let's take those steps to say, if you're a gun owner, prove that you know how to use it. Prove the same way we have to do with a car. It could just be an interview, it could be anything. There's a lot of people when you ask, like, oh, why would you want a gun? They're not good at lying. They're very obviously disturbed, and those things would reduce significantly a lot of these things
Have
that
you
happen.
ever went purchase a gun before?
I have
Right.
tons of guns.
So you know
I have
you
a
have to
Golden
do
Henry
a-
22, I have an AR.
So you have to do a background check, correct?
No. So first off, most states don't even have that. 44 states don't even make
What
you
state?
register
I
it.
never saw a
And
state
then on
that
top
don't
of
have
that,
a
when I
background
bought my
check.
gun, I remember I was 18. There was a little quiz we had to take. Listen, this is a quiz we had to take. And the guy leaned over because, very simply, in his mind, making a gun sale is more important than safety. He leans over and goes, A, B. I mean, I knew there were very basic questions, but it was simply, where do you point a gun? Where's the safest place? And my friend who was with me, who wasn't very smart, we were kids, literally was getting them wrong, and he goes, it's B. And I'm sitting there thinking now, older, going, they don't care. These
that's
people
why
are not well trained
every state is
to
different.
Exactly. California is one of the strictest, and still I walked in and bought a gun at 18 years old knowing nothing about it. My friend who couldn't even pass the test was able to get a gun. That should show you, and this is the problem with like having different areas, Chicago, when people bring this up in the shootings. Yeah, it's because Indiana is literally 2.5 minutes away and you can walk in and get a gun. There's no border checks between states, so it's a very complex issue.
I want to ask a follow-up just to the whole group. Raise your hand if you think mass shootings are a uniquely American issue. And for the people who raised their hand, do you avoid mass gatherings because of concerns?
I have before. There was like a free concert that was going on in my city, and when I saw all of the people and the lack of security, I was like, I need to go home, because it was on the beach, right? And there's not that many metal detectors or anything like that. I'm like, it would be really easy for someone to just bring a gun in here, and I don't want to be a part of it.
Anybody else have an opinion? You avoid mass gatherings?
I am originally from Denver, Colorado.
Me too.
Cool. Yeah, I was in kindergarten when Columbine happened, so I, grew up in schools, I'm sure the same way with you, doing the active shooter drills. So that was something that was always on, or that we knew about from the time I was a child. But then there was also the shooting at the movie theater.
Arvada,
And Arvada, I was at a midnight premiere that night. Luckily, I was not at that one. But I remember coming out and seeing police around because they went to movie theaters in surrounding area just in case something was being planned at other theaters. And thank God nothing happened to me. And I feel so passionately about it. And for the people who, they did lose their lives, that is a reality. But that's something I can't you go into a movie theater, you see the exits, and it's something that comes into your mind. That, okay, that's where you go.
But what stops a bad guy with a gun?
Not letting him get a gun.
Not letting him.
If he has one, though.
Okay,
what stops him?
But that's what we're advocating.
You're not going to get rid of every gun, bro.
No
Let's
one's
get
saying
rid of
that.
it.
I think
You're not going to get rid of every gun for every bad guy.
So if you can't get rid of all guns.
Oh, Justice and then Barbie.
Okay, I was just gonna say, considering that, mass shootings are unique to America, in my opinion, I think it also has to do with the media's portrayal of mass shootings that inflict fear into people.
Yeah, I think the media got I agree.
And glorify it.
I agree.
For example, Alex Jones,
I agree.
Who's a huge conspiracy theorist, basically put into the stratosphere that what happened at that, Sandy Hook, what happened with all those little kids was
said it was
fake.
staged.
It was staged. And since America has the, freedom of speech, it then gets people like Alex Jones and other people to continue this miseducation of how
I just don't feel
mass
safe,
shootings occur.
man. We're right now. If somebody just wants to rob us, right? Just anybody, you just don't know. Somebody breaks in here. We're all dead. Every one of us. I can't protect you.
That's my
want to
faith.
get rid of all guns.
That's my faith then. I'm okay with that.
That's not compared to a nuke. That's compared to a car wreck.
So that is the question. If you guys want to get rid of all guns, right, which you just said, quote, that's never going to happen. So now we know that guns exist.
They're there.
But now I don't have the right to carry one. She doesn't have the right to carry one. You don't have the right to carry one. Someone comes into this building right now and points a gun at every single one of us. How are you okay with saying that my right to fire back and protect me and you, I shouldn't have it? He's allowed to have it because he went and got it illegally, because you just said we can't get rid of all guns. But now I can't get one because I'm not a criminal. Because you can't destroy guns, because a criminal will figure out how to make a new
gun.
kind of
That's
gun.
what I'm saying.
Like there's gun parts all over the world.
There's
They'll put one
everything
together.
that you can do. There's
so when you
ghost
say,
guns.
But then, and this is where the problem with this conversation is things evolve, right? And guns are going to evolve. And if I have the ability to have, in future, 100 years from now, ability for a pistol to be able to shoot something that is as powerful as a grenade, are you going to be like, that's your right, because if someone can have it, I should too.
It's the Second
or someone
Amendment.
can, and that's the problem. There has to be some restriction, unless you all believe that we should all be able to have nukes at our homes, grenades at our homes, grenade launchers at our homes.
We should be able to have equal whatever the government has.
Okay,
That's what it
then-
says on the Second Amendment. That's why they put
So
it's
then
the
you
second thing that
agree
they
we
put
should have
on the
nukes at our
amendment.
homes.
If I
agree
can
with
afford one.
the idea that the whole reason the government gave us a Second Amendment right was to protect ourselves from the government.
terrain
Yeah,
And
okay,
so
we're gonna get into that.
Okay, that's another
Let's go.
prompt.
Let's reset. Yes. Our next prompt is: other countries are jealous of our gun rights here in America. Will the agreeers please step forward?
Oh, wow. Oh, well, you're the fact queen, so I'm sure you're going to spout facts. I'm just going to spout what I see in here, right? Which is that we do have gun rights, and other countries do not have gun rights, and they live under communism now because of what we just stated, that the Constitution gave us gun rights to protect ourselves from the powers of the government. And I am constantly reached out to from countries like Australia who say we are so envious of your gun rights. the minute we lost our freedom was the minute we gave up our guns. And they do use the term "we gave up." They accommodated the slow relinquishing of their right to bear arms, whether it be through banning certain parts, banning the certain amount of bullets that you can carry, taxing this kind of gun, saying that this kind of gun is an assault rifle, which is not what AR stands for, and now we're banning that. So little by little, it's not that they came in and said, everyone open your doors, we're taking your guns. They made it so hard to own guns that now these people don't have the ability to own guns, and they claim that they lost their freedom. And they say things like, I wish I had the rights that you had to protect yourself.
This question's tough because people are not a monolith, and within every country there's differences of opinions. Even in ours, there's obviously differences of opinions. But I certainly think if you were to go and speak to countries like Cuba or North Korea that live under communist dictators who have had all of their rights stripped from them, it starts with taking away their rights to self-defense, and then you're left having to go swimming with sharks to get out of these countries and try to just get to a basic standard of living again. So I do think, yes, there are many people who are envious of what we have here. That's why you have so many people trying to come to America still versus many other countries, because as a whole, despite our problems, this is a good country, and it has a lot of opportunities for people that they don't have in other places in the world. I think there's people who very much want freedom and want to be able to defend it and would rather deal with the consequences or side effects or negatives of that freedom. And there's other people who want to feel secure, I think. They want the government to take care of them. They want to pretend that there are not real evils out there. And I think they often trade very serious negatives that they don't always notice for that security until it's too late. So I think if you were to talk to people in like England, are they regretting that right now? I don't know, but I think they should be. The Second Amendment defends all of the other rights. It's what stands in the gap. And if you look at what's happening to, say, free speech in England, it's terrifying. They're literally locking people up for Facebook posts at this point. Same thing in Australia. So depending on where a country is at a given point, and just depending on the type of person that you ask within it, I think you'd get different answers. But yeah, I think probably more than not are jealous of some of the freedoms we have here, including the Second Amendment.
Great. Let's bring in our disagreeers.
I don't really know. You know what I'm saying? I'm so focused on what we got going on right here. I really couldn't tell you if another country is jealous or not. But I do know I got over 3.5 million followers, and they're not all Americans. You know what I'm saying? So I really can't tell you. That's why I didn't come up. I just don't know.
I mean, you were in active duty though, right?
Marine Corps, yeah.
Yeah. Did you think about that at all?
I was in Operation Iraqi Freedom. I was on the initial push, front line, and a lot of people look at me and they don't think I've been to war and stuff, but they had guns out there. You know what I'm saying? They had guns. Where I went, I see countries with guns, so I don't know.
I'm just a little curious. So you're saying like North Korea and Cuba, if they had guns, they'd be able to obviously overthrow the government, right? But you also said earlier that it's so easy to get a gun. They could just get guns, they could ship them in. So how can a country be so good at blocking guns if you guys said they cannot, it's impossible? I'm a little confused by that. How's that possible?
Because they have no trade possible. They have no freedoms. They have no travel abilities. They are literally stuck in their country. So yeah, if you want to put people in a communist dictatorship, it's very easy to keep them from accessing food or medicines or guns
but
or
you
anything.
said, but he said that you can ship them in illegally.
But if they have shut down their borders.
I think he was talking about here, though.
That's America,
specifically.
yeah.
Yeah,
They're
but I
much
think
more
people are a little bit
talking about
confused.
America.
Cuba, people can go. My family goes to Cuba every year. You can go. People can bring things in.
Perhaps you could, but I think it'd be very difficult because even flying with a gun here in the United States is very difficult from state to state.
Yep,
so no,
I couldn't
it's
even
very
come here with a gun.
heavily
But you
regulated
ship
in
them.
that way. You'd
Huh?
have
Through
to get it
boats,
across
right?
the border
But I can't come to
illegally.
California at all with a firearm. I couldn't
Unless
even wear
you
all my
want to
jewelry.
But what you're
operate
saying is
illegally.
there is a world where a government can enact things and restrictions to
Yeah, if you want
avoid
to give away
things.
all freedoms, no capitalism, no free trade, no ability to actually have any command of your own destiny, then yeah, you can control a lot of things.
Yeah.
You control the media,
Control
you control the
everybody.
ports, you control, yeah, of course, but who would want to live that way?
But what I'm saying is you guys said criminals can still
in
get
America.
guns
So we're
regardless.
talking about,
Yep.
and
And
on
there
top of that,
probably
what I
are
would
guns.
say,
Yes.
Then what we're saying is there probably are guns in Cuba that have been
But not enough
smuggled
to
in,
organize.
but
And
not
we see
enough
what
to say
happens when they try to
we want our
organize.
free speech back. We're rising up.
So-
Not enough.
so
They have
this
to
is-
hide them. They have to pray to God nobody breaks in their house because they're going to have to shoot that person to protect their
Yeah.
family and then account for the gun they shouldn't have had.
So this
they're
is
going to go
some-
to jail.
So my first master's was international relations. I focus on Middle Eastern politics, and we look at Syria. America has not only given the rebels tons of weapons and tanks, and they still can't overthrow the Syrian government, which has pretty shitty military in comparison to us. So this idea that like, oh, we need guns to protect ourselves from the government, things like that. We have Syria being backed by the US and getting guns and weapons and still getting their ass kicked by the Syrian government. So
you also have the United States going to war for 20 years in the Middle East and losing to the Taliban, right?
I
So
agree.
having a bunch of weapons that, the government doesn't, it's about organizing, it's about structure. But yes, a population that is armed, they have a fighting chance of trying to fight back.
Let's say right now, right? Phones are down, lights are on, you have no communication to nothing. The world is going to shit. How would you survive?
The gun would be the least of my worries.
Well, how would you feed yourself?
I would do it. There's a million different ways.
Plants?
Yeah.
Plants.
You think nobody gonna come steal your plants?
But I
I'm
think
serious. No,
concerned
no
about
food.
the
You're
bad
laughing.
people will
I've
come
been in
from what you
Katrina.
have
Have you ever
to
been in
survive.
Katrina? Everybody was trying to fight for their life. They had no food, no nothing, no Pampers, no water. You
But
never been in a hostile
How's guns
environment.
going to help that, though?
Because you
I
could
think
go
it's
get
gonna
it.
No, but
it's
You
gonna
have
heighten
to.
the violence.
wanna-
He's saying,
You
listen,
Rambo, I
have
wanna-
to
he's saying
survive.
someone will take
that
a
something
gun,
you-
Somebody's
someone
gonna
will hold
take
you
your
up for your
stuff.
stuff.
Rambo,
and
is
what are
that
you
something
gonna
you
do?
had to do?
Now, I didn't have it first, but I have friends because I live an hour away from New Orleans, but it got flooded out. If you have a baby, and your baby has no milk, a newborn baby in Solution, and they got it over there.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You have to.
He's not saying he will, he's saying someone else will.
Well,
Someone
and
will
but
rob
I
you
want to
for your-
bounce back on that because there were a lot of Black Americans who
getting
did
shot,
try to go get food, get water, and guess what?
Police and the military.
FEMA and the National Guard shot some of those Black
That's
Americans.
true. That's
who
what
were
I'm
going to. So you're saying if they had a gun, they
got shot without a gun.
So why?
So
would-
why not have one? All right then.
I push
You
back,
got
but
shot without one.
I feel like that wouldn't solve anything, even if they had a gun. They were Black. They were
But
trying
they
to get
didn't
food.
have
This
a
is
gun.
the issue, though, of debating this, which is like they're doing this debate in the world where there are guns everywhere.
Right.
We're creating an environment where there are far less guns, meaning if that happened in the future, there would be far less likely to get shot at in general. And this is why it gets very confusing because I agree with them. In this scenario, is why I have guns now, is like, since everyone has them, like nukes in the US and in the international stage, we need them. But if we can reduce them, then we need less of them personally.
Right.
I'm advocating for a different world where we can push towards something a little bit different, where we would need
Have you
different
ever been in a
resources.
hostile environment?
Yeah, I grew up in the Middle East.
Doing what? Like, tell
In
me.
Lebanon, we grew up in the Middle East. There was war, there was bombs. Everywhere we went, there was tanks.
And you didn't think nobody needed a firearm?
These environments are different. Doing a third world country versus first world America is drastically different. And to say,
It-
hey,
like-
all of these
like
countries
living
have
in,
this,
I heard living
then
in
we should have it too, is
living
different.
in Chicago is like living in third world country.
Chicago
I
ranks
heard living
actually.
in New Orleans is like living in third world country.
If we give up
Chicago's
our guns, we will
36th
be a
on-
third
on-
world
New
country.
Orleans is like the
and then
murder
we will be
capital.
Exactly.
Yeah.
what-
So England's a third world country.
We're going to reset, and then we'll do a prompt specifically about
Might as well
citizens
be.
defending themselves.
England might as well be.
Citizens should have guns to hold the government in check. If you agree, step forward.
Come on, let's be real. Nobody needs a nuke. You know what I mean? He keep on saying nukes. Man, come on, who gonna buy a nuke and put it in the house? Yeah, of course, we got a problem there. But guns, regular guns, I think everybody should have the right to get it. Why not? So let's be real. It's the Second Amendment. It's the second thing that they put in the amendment. And what is it for? The right to protect from a terrain government. It is the second thing that they put. The first is what? Freedom of speech, right?
The second thing they changed.
It's the second thing. So it got to be important.
It's not that we're all here like waiting for the day that we can overthrow the government,
Yeah.
right? And I'm not looking at how I can get a nuke to overthrow the government.
right.
I care more about my personal self-defense against common everyday predators, and I've experienced them. But the reality is, the ones with the guns have more control and more power, right? So if the government has all the weapons at their disposal to tell us what to do and we have nothing, then we are befallen to accommodate whatever it is that they request. We are the slaves. We are not free. We must do what they say because they hold all the power.
So I think it takes a long time for citizens to rise up. I think our government is horrendous. I think it's very big. I think it usurps people's liberties every day. It does many injustices. Probably the time for people to rise up was a long time ago. But whether or not it enables you to effectively overthrow the government, yes, maybe sometimes. You have like the Battle of Athens in Tennessee, which was after World War II, where veterans came back to a very corrupt police force that was rigging elections and that was unjustly incarcerating people, and they organized and they ran the sheriff out of town and they took over their government again. So yes, I do think that it is fundamental. I think our founders gave us that right in order to try to hold the government at bay. I think they had an understanding of power power systems and how they always tend to grow and encroach on people's freedoms and liberties. And I think that were it not for the Second Amendment, were it not for the proliferation of guns and of people actively using their Second Amendment in this country, we probably would see a lot greater injustices. But I think if you look at the trajectory of countries that have disarmed people and where that's gone for them, it has increasingly led to a worse and worse quality of life, fewer freedoms, and a deterioration in the basic liberties and freedoms that they enjoy across the spectrum.
What does citizens standing up to the U.S. government with the military that it has look like?
It looks terrible, man. We would never want to see nothing like that. You know what I mean? Like.
But I guess that's
Bloodbath.
what I'm saying is if you say that it's to hold the government in check, what does that look like? Because our military is...
They're in check. They're not messing with us. I think of government as regular people. You know what I mean? It's still regular people that works the government. They're going to always put themselves ahead. You know what I mean? If you have somebody that works in the government and their family's on the line and my family's on the line, what you think the government is going to do? Protect their family first. So why can't I be able to protect my family?
So when it comes to what that looks like, it looks like the BLM rallies of a few years ago, pushing back against police brutality. It looks like the civil rights movement. It looks like nonviolent civil disobedience, often arming people in the community in that process because they will be attacked by police. They will be attacked by the government when there is a threat towards them. Those threaten their locuses of power. And you can see that in the overreaction to those events. People do have power. The government is afraid of us when we start actually communicating with one another, working across the aisle, building coalitions, petitioning, lobbying. The problem is that the vast majority of Americans are off duty. They're not paying attention, they're asleep at the wheel, they're not doing the basic jobs they need to do to show up and hold their elected people accountable. But I've seen what happens when you do. It really doesn't take much to scare them because it's so random that it even occurs. So that's what it looks like. Nonviolent civil disobedience. It's Martin Luther King Jr.'s like 6 principles of change. And it works. And it works, and by the way, it works
But
across
you said
the world.
nonviolent, right?
Yeah,
So
nonviolent
where do
civil
guns
disobedience.
have to do with
You
that?
have the gun if you have to defend yourself against the government.
Yeah.
It does
I
make
guess
them
when
more
I-
likely
has
to be
guns.
violent
I guess
against
all I'm
you.
saying is when I hear nonviolent protest, I don't think of firearms. Okay, so let's bring in the disagreeers.
I think our American government picks and chooses which citizens have the right to bear arms in a way. For example, like Hannah, or you were saying, in 2020, I was fortunate enough to be on the ground almost every day, organizing, empowering youth, especially Black and brown youth in Orange County. But what I seen was during these uprisings, we had white supremacist groups like Proud Boys, Patriot Front, and other white supremacist groups in Orange County, by the way, bearing arms, coming to these, peaceful, nonviolent rallies and bearing arms, brandishing firearms while police were there, and not get arrested, not get checked. But when we, as Black and brown folks in 2020, wanted to defend ourselves, maybe bring some pepper spray or maybe have a taser in a backpack. I've seen many of my friends get arrested, 10 years, 20 years, get stopped and frisked.
I agree.
While white supremacists were brandishing weapons in front of 10 to 15-year-old Black and brown people. So that's why I disagreed, because I think our American government, they tend to pick and choose which citizens in America get to bear arms.
And I think that the Black Panthers is a perfect example of that. That's exactly what was going on with the Black Panthers. They armed themselves to be able to stand up to a government that was putting a tax on them, basically, right? We all know what happens, right? It's in practice, like, yes, the Second Amendment, that's what it's supposed to do, but it depends who has the weapons.
I actually kind of disagree with the prompt for a different reason. I feel like, for me personally, I don't like guns, right? And I'm not gonna encourage anyone that I know to get a gun. And I just don't like anything really violent. And you could say that oh, I'm living in a fairy tale world because I don't wanna use violence and stuff like that. And I definitely am, but I mean, the bottom line is I don't like violence, and I'm not going to advocate for anyone to perform acts of
But you
violence.
see, I respect those type of people. That's fine. If you don't like violence and you want to be great, that's cool. But would you ever want to protect yourself?
Well, I'm fortunate enough to live in an area that's pretty safe. I don't feel scared or the need to protect myself when I am walking alone at night, which is great. I'm really
That's
fortunate
good.
for that.
That's good. See, it's all where you live.
It's where you live.
You will not always be that fortunate. I mean, they will
Let's
find
go back
you.
to the prompt. We're talking about citizens having guns to protect themselves from the government.
There's so many arguments to want a gun, right? I think the self-protection is probably one of the strongest ones. I think second is hey, I live in Georgia on a farm, the odds of me going out and doing this when I have a farm and this and that, I want to hunt, I think those are reasonable. So I come from a different view of guns should just be regulated, they should be restricted in a way, and if there's a reason you need it, I think it's perfectly right, especially in this day and age. But the idea of like, I need this because I'm going to fight the government, yes, 200 years ago when this was written, or longer, the government did look drastically different. The weapons that they had looked drastically different. It was a little bit more of a playing field. I just think that now, I'm sure everyone on the pro-gun side agrees that the government's way too big, but none of you have picked up arms and went to the Capitol building and tried to actually shoot or do anything. And going to the Capitol building on January 6th didn't do anything, even with many of them. So in that sense, like, people drastically misunderstand what it takes for people to actually pick up arms. I studied this for a long time.
But you're taking it the wrong way, bro. Like, if they, let's say they try to come get guns right now. You think all the people who guns
it's just
gonna fight
fear-mongering.
back? That's when it's going to fight against the government.
That's what they said in Australia, and that's
Australia. That's not America.
I think it's a rarity that you could see people rise up and effectively do this because of how big the government is, because of its techniques and tools. It would require actively training and organizing for some time. But if not that, then what is the solution for when things really hit the fan? What is the answer for people
I think it's just
in those
fear-mongering. It's a
situations?
slippery slope of like, we're going to be North Korea
Yeah, but
if we don't
can.
have guns.
You can end up there. So what do those people do?
So I think there's a drastic difference between America and North Korea. If you're creating, again, a whole different scenario, there is context. It would be a completely different answer.
But I'm just asking, in any country, if not,
like Gandhi,
if
right?
not Second Amendment,
Gandhi, for example, he picked up like AR-15s and guns and he shot, right? That's how he freed India.
how did he free India?
Not through violence, through non-violence. So what you said, it's basically a lot of
And
it
who
is
did
just
he overthrow?
organizing.
Organizing, yeah.
But what I'm saying is,
But who did he overthrow?
I'm saying getting freedom.
Just answer the question.
No, I'm just saying getting.
We all need to know, who did he overthrow?
I'm saying the government. I'm saying people who
But
are in
what
power over
government
them.
system did he overthrow?
Even if it's England, even if it's
But
anyone.
he didn't.
But
He had a great movement. He didn't overthrow a government.
But did he change anything?
He definitely changes people's opinions.
we're
That's not
talking
what I'm
about
asking.
overthrowing
I'm
the
asking,
government.
how do you overthrow a
But-
tyrannical
okay, but
government
you're saying
without a Second Amendment?
But there's this like distinction between overthrow and change. In Egypt, you could call it overthrow, you can call it change. They got the
They had a
president
military
out.
coup.
In Egypt?
Yes.
Or in Tunisia?
I mean,
A military
I
with
wanna
guns,
piggyback
with guns.
on that. I want to piggyback on that.
I was actually there.
I'm gonna let you ask. I just want to say, in South Africa, they overthrew the government through nonviolent means. Nelson Mandela preached nonviolence, and he actually was in prison for 20 years and still on the terrorist watch list because even when Obama was in office, he was on a terrorist watch list for overthrowing the government of South Africa for apartheid.
There were no guns involved in that.
And there was no type of faction groups involved. I mean, there were
No
some
weapons.
faction groups, but Nelson Mandela didn't promote that.
Okay, but plenty of people had guns.
They had
In order
weapons.
to do that, they had weapons. I don't know of any example throughout history where you have seen a tyrannical government actively overthrown without the use of guns by some parties, and nonviolent
Okay,
people
Sarah,
advocates
I mean,
are
Haiti,
important.
we see Haiti right now.
I hear
You're
your
right,
point.
you're right.
The NRA is a respectable organization. Will the agreeers please step forward?
Oh, yeah! Middle ground! Yes!
I didn't see this on my bingo card. All right, whoever disagrees, come in.
I don't know, I guess we could all just come talk
That's
about
pretty
it now.
funny, actually.
I love a good NRA bashing session. Let's go.
Yeah, I guess the pro-gun people I want to hear from first.
Hilarious. I'll just go ahead and say I didn't step either way because I don't feel like I have any authority on that topic. I don't know enough about what they do or don't do. So I just was gonna stay back.
Well, I'm the biggest YouTuber, African American in the world for guns. And the NRA never called me to do anything with them.
Interesting.
They never called me and asked me a question. You see what I'm saying? I never did no kind of work with them. They never said, hey, hi, Black Rambo, we appreciate what you do. And I just don't respect them. I was like, well, why wouldn't you say something with me? Would you
Come
do
speak
something?
up
Yeah, I
for-
can help
yeah.
you talk to the community. I can go to Chicago. I can go to all these hoods and walk dead in the middle and shake hands and nothing go down. And I could talk to people, but the NRA never came to me.
I would like to say, screw the NRA. They are atrocious, and they've always been atrocious. They are not a gun rights organization. They are a Republican shill organization. They do not care about the gun rights of people of color. Not once, not
I
never.
was just wondering why they never called me.
In
you
fact,
know?
they've actively advocated for gun
yeah,
control
exactly.
in the past that explicitly was put in place to block black people. And to this date, they continue to be some of the worst people on the ground lobbying when it comes to the Second Amendment. They are constantly looking to restrict it. On top of that, they are super corrupt the way they use their funds. I don't understand how anybody is still giving them money. Like, it is just going to their private planes and their makeup budgets. They do not actually stand for individual rights. They will always pick the police over you. I hate them. There are so many better gun groups out there. I'm a little hot under the collar about this one, but screw the NRA.
Even after Uvalde the shooting, the NRA almost spent about $15 million bringing up ads on how that, guns should have been in the hands of teachers to prevent these shootings. They have given so much money to even Democrats and Republicans alike. So it's not, I would just want to say, it's not just only Republicans. The NRA has the ear of Democrats in America as well. So that tells you how big of an organization the NRA could be and how dangerous it is.
And how much they fuel political corruption.
Yes.
Like that, to me, I can't say it any better than what you've already said.
Honestly, too, one time back when they still had like the NRA TV, it's gone now because of all their lawsuits and fighting, but NRA TV interviewed me to be a host back in 2016, and I was like going through their whole processes with them. And then they were like, okay, great, we want you to go on and test, and you have to go talk about why it's so important to support Trump. And I was like, I'm not supporting Trump, and he's not even very pro-Second Amendment. By the way, Trump passed more gun control than Obama. I didn't get the job. And that was when I knew. I was like, this isn't about guns at all. This is a Republican shill organization.
What's your political identification?
Homeless.
Yeah, I don't do politics myself
I'm
either.
politically homeless. I think both parties suck. They're atrocious. I think the two-party system's like one of the worst things in the country, and nothing gets better till it's broken.
I want to do something we've never done before. This was kind of an unexpected discussion. There were a lot of different points of view. Didn't think there would be no NRA supporters. That one doesn't count, but what are 5 things y'all agreed on?
I think we all agree that there are a lot of black folks like Black Panthers and resistance groups who had bared arms and were, those rights were taken away from them.
I think
we
everyone
all
was in
agreed.
agreement around like community-based responses to violence, trying to handle things without government or more policing.
I think what Hannah said is exactly right, which is when you attack gun violence or taking away guns, whatever, even if they all agreed, let's take away guns, you have to do it in a very strategic way, because otherwise you are now targeting a specific group, and so I think whichever way we even go, we all know that it will, again, attack one community over another. And whichever route we go forward, we have to address the differences between how we treat inner city areas or impoverished areas versus other areas.
So 3 would be like, gun violence is bad. Can we all agree on that? Killing people
All
with
violence
guns
is bad. I would just say all violence. Violence is awful.
Well, and I don't think we agreed on like just that one statement, right, which is not everyone with a mental health issue goes and shoots people, but everyone who would go and shoot people en masse clearly has a mental health issue.
What I would say is don't stigmatize mental illness in this process, because so much of this conversation does end up stigmatizing people with mental illness, does make them less likely to seek help and resources for fear of stigmatization. And so mental health might be a component of addressing gun violence, but we can't like hang our hat on it.
Number 5, I think we would all agree, is that whether it's the government or the news or capitalism, however you want to face it, the media and the government naturally fearmonger in many different ways or glorify things, right? Like it's in the news's nature to replay these things over and over again to make money for many different reasons, and that is then perpetuating people going, oh, if I want attention, if I want to be known, I can go do these things, and they will talk about me for years.
Yeah, I agree, because it was so many times they posted the face of Kyle Rittenhouse. There were so many times they posted the face of the individual who shot the people in that Buffalo.
But you think that make other people do it? You think that make somebody
I think that makes more.
Well, there's a reason why we see it a little bit different. Like in Canada, I have a lot of friends from all over different countries, and they're like, dude, your news, like they have just as much crime around the world. The news tends to go like, oh, there's a bear that entered our town.
And that's what we're saying.
Here it's like shooting, this.
The media
And they don't show the victims, but they show the shooter.
Yes.
Why don't you?
Just for money, right?
Why don't
Like
you
it's
show
gonna
the
get
It
victims?
comes from private investors.
Also for the cops. Like they run cover for the cops and the FBI and
Right.
the actual statistics all the time.
I think we can agree that there's government failings that lead to all of us disagreeing or there being an issue in general.
Media manipulation.
Why would
I
you
agree with
want to
that.
know what's going on?
These are all too fuzzy for me.
Yes,
Let me,
I can
one that I heard that maybe could be our 5th one. I didn't hear anybody say that they really foresaw a future of like U.S. citizens fighting the military.
Wait, I have the 5th though.
Yeah.
The NRA is trash.
Of course.
I said that didn't count, but we'll just put the NRA is trash.
All right.
Read it.
Good job, guys.
Good job. Thank you.
I'm a hugger.
Good talk.
Good
Yeah, I'll hug you.
Good.
Your shirt is so
Good.
soft.
Good job. Good job.
Nice to meet you. Congrats on your newborn. How many months?
Congrats, by the way.
You just graduated?
Yeah.
What year, this year?